You don't have to travel very far to go into the wild, because there are 618 million acres of American wild lands. Isn't that crazy? 618 million! These lands stretch coast to coast and include beautiful canyons, rivers, deserts, mountains, wildflower fields, and forests. The wilderness is just one of those places you have to see for yourself, because a picture just doesn't do it justice. There's something about being surrounded by undeveloped land and seeing things that many people have never seen before that gives you a sense of new beginnings and fresh starts. Maybe that's why the wild has captured the imagination of people. But as great as it is, most people never experience the wonders of the wild. Maybe it's simply because they don't want to, or they don't have enough time to go on an adventure, or it's just too dangerous. Personally, I would like to be a little more in touch with the wilderness within me. To be honest, sometimes I wish I could grow a gnarly beard like Pastor Corey and trade in my skinny jeans for a flannel jacket and pants from the Duluth Trading Company. Then get in my car, drive to the nearest forest, and walk right in to hunt and scavenge with my bare hands. That'd be awesome. But the reality is, I'm much more confident and comfortable with a hairdryer than a hammer. The closest I get to the wilderness is my wife. Now, she is much more in touch with the wilderness than I am. She loves to fish and hunt, get her hands dirty in the yard, and walk outside barefoot. And you know what her favorite smell in the world is? It's not lavender or cinnamon, those are mine. Hers is cow manure. Yeah, cow manure. She breathes in real deep through her nostrils when we go to the stock show. Jessica is both good looking and grizzly. Basically, I married Katniss Everdeen. Maybe you're like me and you're not very in touch with your wild side. You leave the adventures of wilderness exploration to trusted experts like Bear Grylls. That's because the wild is unknown, it's uncomfortable. You can get lost, you can get hurt, you can be eaten for goodness sakes. And my hunch is that most people don't want to get eaten by a wild Bengal tiger. So most people never travel outside the boundaries of safe touristy places. Most people never go into the wild. Now this makes sense and is totally fine, but if you ask people who've actually done it and been there, climbed mountains, rafted rivers, visited jungles, hiked trails, seen deserts, they'll tell you that you're missing out. They'll tell you that there is a part of life that you can only experience by going into the wild, into the unknown. Now don't worry, I'm not saying that we should all go on some super dangerous camping trip. What I'm getting at is that a lot of us think the exact same way when it comes to following God. You may even know some people who have gone into the wild with God. By that I mean they follow God's plan for their lives and it is filled with adventure. Sure, sometimes it's risky, but most often it's rewarding. And maybe there are even moments when you think, hey, I want to do that too. But when it actually comes to doing something or taking a step, you tend to freeze up. Maybe it's because you don't know what it looks like to go into the wild with God. What does it look like to follow Him? Does it mean you act a certain way during worship, volunteer somewhere, or go on mission trips? What if God calls you to do something you don't want to do? What if following Him means your life becomes boring? Or maybe you hear people talk about following Jesus and you wonder, follow Him where? Where's He going? Where is He? Or maybe it's not that. Maybe it's you're convinced that we're doing everything wrong. For those of us who've been a Christian for a while, it can feel like we've already stepped into the wild. However, we can sometimes feel like we're lost and wandering in circles. Maybe that's you. Maybe you remember deciding to follow Jesus, but since then you haven't seemed to get anywhere. Your faith feels the exact same as it did before. And you keep wondering, shouldn't I be further along than I am now? I guess I'm doing everything wrong. Either way, you don't move. You don't take a step because you aren't sure that you're ready to take a plunge into the unknown with God. And for some of us, that keeps us from making a decision to follow Him in the first place. And for others, this has kept us at a safe distance where we watch other people have a faith that affects change and impacts people in amazing ways. In this case, we play the game of life safely. But there's something inside of us that tells us playing it safe is a decision to lose the game. When we ignore God, hesitate to respond to the promptings of His Spirit, allow fear to govern our decisions, we are choosing to play it safe and lose the game of life, all while watching other people around us live an adventure and make a difference. But it doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to settle for the scraps of other people's success. Listen, God has put incredible potential inside of everyone, including you, but it's up to each of us to responsibly activate that potential, turning it into purpose. And we activate this potential by stepping out and into the wild with God. You have to be willing to do something you've never done to become someone you've never been. But that's uncomfortable and unknown. just like going into the wild. Now, the good news is that we definitely aren't the first people to feel that way. Throughout history, people have wrestled with what it means to trust God and whether or not they actually want to go where He's leading them to go. Maybe the most famous of those people was a man named Abraham. He's often referred to as Father Abraham. And although many of you have probably heard of him, chances are you don't know a ton about him. Abraham is a guy whose life is recorded in the Old Testament. But he isn't just found in the Old Testament. There are three major religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, basically more than half of the entire population on planet Earth, who all trace their beginnings and heritage back to this one guy. So he's clearly a big deal. But why? What was it about Abraham that kept his story and legacy alive throughout the entire human history? Before we answer that question, let's look at this one fact. Abraham was a truly ordinary and unremarkable guy. He's a lot like you and me. When we're introduced to him at the first part of the book of Genesis, his name was Abram. He and his family lived in an area of the world called Ur, and he was married but didn't have any kids. He lived a normal, comfortable, and safe life. But then God spoke to him. And what God said to this ordinary man was extraordinary. So much so that it still impacts each one of us today. The Lord said to Abraham, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on the earth will be blessed through you." Did you catch that? The very first word God spoke to Abraham was, "Go." It's like God was saying, "Abram, I have something for you, but to receive it, you're going to have to go. You're going to have to leave what's familiar and comfortable and head off to a new land that you don't know and you've never been to. A land that's wild." Now, that may not seem like a very significant thing to say, but it is. Because God knows that if we want to grow, we have to go. We have to move. We can't stay exactly where we are, do nothing, and expect to grow. We have to do things in our lives that moves us to places where it takes faith and trust to go there. Now, this is difficult for us a lot of times and for a lot of reasons, but maybe most of all because we aren't assured of what the outcome will be. If we want to try out for something, we want to make sure that we'll make the team, club, or theater group. If we want to have a hard conversation with a friend, we want to be certain they'll still be friends with us afterwards. If we tell someone about our faith or invite them to church, we want to know they won't laugh in our face. We want to know that things will go well. But you already know the problem with that. That never happens. Most of the great things that have happened in the history of the world didn't start with a certainty of knowing how things would end up. See, God promises to be with us, but He rarely tells us how a situation will end. And God was equally vague with Abraham. He said, "Go, and I will show you." He doesn't tell him where the land is or how he will get there. He just says, "Go and trust me." The invitation for Abraham to go was complicated. God was not just asking Abram to go on a mini vacay, but to leave his extended family, including the people who knew and loved, for good. It was the start of a new life, and God was asking him to go, but also to grow. As in, "Abraham, I want you to grow up. I've got something bigger for you and something amazing in store for your future, but you have to be willing to leave everything first." And God didn't exactly give him an address or a GPS system to find his way. And it's crazy how Abraham responded knowing that fact. So Abraham went as the Lord had told him. He went. God said go, and Abraham did. It was a small but significant step. At the time, it seemed impossible that Abraham would achieve what God had promised him. I mean, in normal life, there's just no way that a random dude's decision to leave his home actually results in him becoming a great nation. But that happened. And most importantly, Abraham's small step into the wild with God needs to be viewed in the bigger context of a greater movement. Abraham's step toward God in faith set in motion God's plan to send the Savior, Jesus Christ. That first step changed Abraham's life, and it changed the direction of human history. Abraham's decision to step out in faith affected not only his destiny, but has the power to change ours too. And the same is true for you. Your decisions determine your destiny, and even the destiny of other people. Every decision. Which person you sit next to at lunch, what you wear to school, what you post and when you post it, who you date, what you do and don't do when you're dating, who you recognize, who you ignore, which road you take on your way home. I mean, everything. And I don't say that to make you stressed out about making the right breakfast selection tomorrow, but I'd say it to emphasize the power of your decisions, even the small ones. They are destiny altering. God sees you just like He saw Abraham. He sees you as someone with incredible potential. And God wants to do something great in you and through you. And He has a future for you that you can't currently imagine. And sometimes that starts by us being willing to leave what's comfortable and take a single step into the wild and into the unknown. Now, that doesn't mean that you tell your family adios and you venture off into the woods without a map. It simply means you take one small step that you believe God is asking you to take. Maybe for you, it's a step toward repairing your family by treating your mom or one of your siblings with respect, even if they don't deserve it. Maybe it's following God's call to move away from a friendship or a dating relationship you know isn't good for you or your future. Maybe God is calling you to be honest about something with your life group. Maybe it's going on a mission trip. Maybe it's deleting some specific apps on your phone that you know aren't helpful to making wise choices. Maybe it's simply starting to volunteer or serve somewhere. And the list could go on and on for days. But when you think about doing something like this, sometimes it feels scary. And I get it. There are a million excuses not to follow through with it. We'll never run out of excuses that get us out of doing the things that we don't want to do, but we know we should do. But you know what you and I can't see? You can't see what God will do in you and through you at step number 2. So instead of focusing on the what ifs of steps number 2 and beyond, focus on your first step and take it. There's no way Abraham could have confidently known exactly if and how God would make him the father of many nations. And there's no way he could have envisioned himself becoming the ancestor of Jesus, who would change the course of human history. When Abraham started his journey, there was no way he could have seen the significance of that first step, and neither can you and I. The truth is, you have no idea what God will do in your life or the lives of the people around you. You have no idea how your steps can impact your future and their futures. And you won't know until you take the first one, until you trust God enough to venture into the wild and follow Him into unknown territory. Here's the good news, and don't miss this. God is always calling you somewhere better. And it doesn't mean it's easy or that it'll always be fun, but it's better. In fact, Jesus put it this way in John 10:10. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. He has a great plan for you. You weren't created to exist, but to live. Existing is replaying yesterday's routine. Living is choosing to take a risk, going on an adventure, doing something different, meeting someone new, all of this with and for Jesus. But first, you have to move. This means you have to trust Him enough to take a step in the direction you think He wants you to go, even when you're not sure how it will turn out. As you head to Life Group, I want you to think about what that step might be for you. Where do you think God could be leading you? If you don't know, that's okay. Your Life Group leader is a great person to ask and help you figure it out. But if there's an area where you know He's calling you, I want you to ask Him for the courage to take a single step in that direction. He's a good God, and He can be trusted. And take it from those of us who have been on a journey with Him for a while. It's totally worth it.